So welcome to the panel which is called Future of 3D Audio or Immersive Audio Beyond Film and Music. So during this panel, we would like to discuss like a more practical use cases where 3D audio technologies can be used, and so not on because usually we talk about film and music. But actually, there are different industries and use cases where this technology can be used, and maybe there's even there are better use cases than we initially thought. So also welcome our guest. So I'll just give a voice to everybody to introduce. So maybe I'll start from myself because I have a microphone with me. So my name is Tomasz Żernicki, and I'm the founder of a few companies. So first is Zilia, Ambisonics Microphones. And then I also just recently opened a company, My 3D Audio, where I focus mainly on developing 3D audio technologies for different use cases. And one of those use cases is Inclusivity Forge. So this is accessibility for games, which I also would like to talk a little bit. And also maybe I'll give a voice to Remi.
Oh, yes, thank you. Hi, I'm Rémi Audfray. I'm currently with Meta on the Sonic team, working on audio technology for extended reality, so AR, VR, MR, yeah, I've been in this working in this area for quite some time. I was working at Magic Leap before Meta with Jean-Marc Jard, who on the panel downstairs, and spent a number of years at working on bringing technology to bring Dolby Atmos to consumers, so headphone rendering, and especially the content creation tools that come with that. And with that, I'll pass to the next speaker.
Hello everyone, my name is Wojciech Ozimek. And I work at Avid on the Pro Tools team, so I'm technical program manager helping to put together new features into Pro Tools. Some of those are obviously immersive. Will be quite a lot of immersive features this year. Outside of Avid, I also host a podcast called Audio Product Podcast. So since I'm a product manager by education, I don't have like an engineering background, but a product management, so I always laugh that I'm mostly interested about the practical applications and mostly commercial applications of technologies, right? So aside, I also work a little bit with Tomek, and I got into immersive audio by using actually Zilia microphones that Tomek created in his company. So try to use them to see how far I can go with using, ambisonic microphones in a, like a music recording, field recording, etc. So I was not really interested about how sophisticated technologically things are, but how great pull in the market for those technologies are, how good they are understood, by the consumers. This is what product managers do, right? They try to sort of commercialize and make technologies available for people in the form of product, right? Thank you.
So I'm Piotr. I'm a co-founder and head of Ivory Tower Soundworks, a studio where we create sound and music for action games, horror games, and more like dark-themed games. I think of myself as a practitioner, so I'll be presenting the point of view of how implementing these spatial audio technologies might look like in reality. What are the challenges? What to think about when trying to sell this idea? So yeah, that's me.
Maybe I'll add something why Piotr's voice is also very important, because Piotr represents like indie game developers, but still, this industry is worth around $200 billion US. So that's the every year-to-year revenue, yeah. And if we compare, for example, pro audio hardware, so this is 20 billion US dollars. So it's like the game industry is like 10 times bigger than the audio hardware. So I think that it will be really interesting to see what kind of challenges this industry have. And yeah, we have the second panel today about the future of 3D audio, which is really interesting. That and I think that this is one of the most common question in our community. And it is interesting because 3D audio is quite a lot of time with us, but still we don't. We still even have a challenges in defining the name. So can you clearly give like a great keynote about immersive audio yesterday? Yeah. So maybe I will ask the first question. We talk about the future audio. So maybe I'll ask the panelists, what do you think about what is beyond the established use? So, and how do you see the technology, 3D audio, immersive audio in the next 3 to 5 years? And what do you think will be the main use case, use case from your point of view, from your industry? And so maybe let's start from Remi.
Sure, thank you. I think we still have a long way to go in adoption of the technology that exists today, even in things like virtual reality. We have great tools now for spatial audio rendering, acoustic simulation, and I think there's still a lot of work to get good adoption of those existing tools by the community. I think beyond the existing things that are solved with products today, one area I'm excited about, especially working for a company that has a big involvement with social media, is around user-generated content. I think today there's a lot of tools for spatial audio, but there's also a big learning curve. And so even for professional audio engineers, there's a lot to learn to get familiar with the workflow and the different formats and so on. So there's already there sort of a high bar, and it goes to another order of magnitude if you talk about a consumer who has no experience with any kind of audio functionality, aside from maybe cutting clips in their content when they're sharing videos. I think there's interesting opportunities there to think about how do we democratize the creation of spatial audio from potentially using AI and other new technology to help make it more intuitive. And I think the other part that's interesting there is the new category of devices we're starting to see. Headphones or earbuds are getting smarter and smarter with more embedded technology. We also see more and more smart glasses that have microphones and speakers. I think this brings a lot of interesting opportunity in terms of how we can capture experiences and share them in a way that improve your ability to share experiences and relive them later, or enable your friends to relive moments that you've experienced. So so in terms of new areas that I think have a lot of potential from my perspective, where I currently work, that seems like an area very exciting. Yeah.
But maybe one comment, because in terms of user-generated content, we talk about content that is amateur, like created even by kids, not professional audio engineers or pros, right?
That's right, and that's why I think there's a lot of work to make that process of creating not necessarily high quality, but at least acceptable or useful spatial experiences, both from the, how can you ideally go from just making a recording from your phone or from a pair of glasses or some other device and make that almost automatically something interesting and immersive. I think that's where there's exciting potential.
Okay, thanks. Wojtek?
Well, I find actually very interesting what you say, Remi, because personally I see that music industry is still very conservative, and I mean people who tend to experiment with immersive technology sometimes are even hated on the internet. I can see like some very known mixing, mastering engineers. So as a product person who always look for a path of the least resistance, I see other industries, like for example, like a content created by people on the internet just for fun, for example. Also accessibility, what you, Tomasz, got involved in, is actually super interesting. Actually today in Warsaw, a friend of mine he works in a foundation that helps people, visually impaired people, to learn how to, somebody who lost sight, not just who is blind from the birth, so how they can, sort of learn to move in space by using, I think they created like a cross, like a crossroad when you can cross the street, using spatial technology. Unfortunately, he cannot be here today because obviously it's just like in parallel. Is happening somewhere there. So accessibility could be another one. Automotive, of course, it's also like interesting. We can see more and more, even companies who initially were not involved in automotive, like Audiokinetic from Canada, right? They mostly involved in games, WIs, right? The middleware for including audio in games, but they have just last year, I think, had their first implementation of 3D audio in cars. So I think, of course, entertainment, but I mean like museums or some kind of immersive, entertainment, like of course everybody knows Las Vegas Dome, so this kind of stuff, So I mean, not necessarily music or, see, predicting future is super hard, but I would bet, if I was to bet something, I would probably say all these kind of non-traditional applications, right? Music will come later.
So my perspective is limited only to game dev, I think, and I think it revolves around budgeting mostly because audio gets the short end of the stick in budgeting in game production. So it very much depends on the costs that are imposed on developers when implementing these technologies and the ease of implementation. Once we do already have some tools that like middleware or even like a basic functionality in Unreal Engine about spatial audio. But now, again, the main issue now is to sort of balance it, the difficulty of implementation, the cost that will be implied on the developers, and the actual ability to sell the idea. I mean, developers often ask what for. Like not many people will be able to audition these technologies and play games that actually, so that I can actually hear the difference. And so I think it just revolves around these three things. There is some progress in each of these areas, but then again, I think we're a few steps from actually having some bright perspectives in using it widely in indie games and AA games.
From your perspective, if you can describe like what is the stage of implementation of 3D audio in the game industry, so how would you describe this? Do you use this often, this 3D audio technologies?
No, not too often, because of the reasons that I've mentioned. Again, my perspective is not like, let's say, Remi's perspective on AAA titles. My is more like an indie and AA. And just saying in plain words, it's often difficult to convince developers to use this technology. That's the main constraint, I think. But again, it kind of extends on the entire audio. Like, why budget audio more? Even some, single developers or indie devs don't really find any need. Like, they try to develop all the audio themselves, like buying sample packs, and they don't even know they need a sound designer or an audio team to properly implement it, to make choices that align with the artistic and technical vision and gameplay vision of the game. So it's I think that's a combined problem and complex problem, and in case of spatial technologies, it's even more apparent in this case.
Yeah, I think if I can add to that, one of the challenges, and even we see it even with AAA games, is there's sometimes a lack of awareness, and there's also confusion by the terminology used in the industry. So some game engines, for instance, will have the built-in functionality, which isn't truly spatial, but they might call it 3D audio because it's using the 3D position of objects to do stereo panning. And so sometimes people think they're using spatial audio when they're not. And so I think there's still some education there. But I think another thing that could really help is pushing for more native implementation of these technologies. So there's a growing number of devices now that offer spatial audio rendering as a service done at the OS level. It exists on gaming consoles, on PC. It's something we now support on a Quest for VR. And so that potentially enables leveraging that in the game engine. So by default, when you're choosing 3D audio in the game engine, you would let the system handle all the rendering, and so you would get all of that by default. And I think that's something else that could help a lot. Make it easier to get spatial audio out of the box, and also get around the current kind of misunderstanding in the industry sometimes. Yeah.
Okay, so maybe also I present my point of view, because right now I'm betting, let's say, on accessibility and 3D audio as a technology for accessibility. And why I'm betting on this, let's say, accessibility is give people with some kind of disabilities to actually, in terms of game, to actually they provide a way to how they can play the game. Yeah. And this is can be done, by giving some special audio cues, or maybe some adjust, give the audio description to the game, and so on and so on. And but the next level of this is inclusivity. So inclusivity is like when you add the special features to game, then people without disabilities and with disabilities, they will not see or hear any difference, let's say, from the perspective on the game. And why I think this is like a growing market right now, and why 3D audio is important there. Accessibility in video games is not for, let's say, aesthetic, but more for like giving the possibility to play the game. So it's like, and if you look at the population, so there is around 20% of people have visual impairments, like from the to the mid level. And there's like a bigger and bigger awareness of the community that kind of accessibility should be added to games. And even EU, like right now, is preparing for us regulation for the game industry that every game should have that kind of features. So so there is like a push on every front. And so far we see the accessibility features in like a AAA games like Last of Us or Spider-Man, that I also will show later. And but I think that in the next few years, like maybe 5 years, we'll have more and more specialists, sound designers that will dedicate their work, that they work on the accessibility in games. Okay, so maybe let's go to another topic. So what's the specific technical workflow bottleneck currently limits the creative application of immersive audio from your area, and what kind of breakthrough is needed in this industry to actually make the immersive audio available in this industry? So maybe Piotr, maybe you start.
Okay, but if you could precise, you mean technical difficulties or like artistic difficulties, or what field do you mean?
I think like technical workflow or artistic, anything that actually prevent right now adoption of the immersive audio, like in your industry. Yeah, you mentioned that especially in the indie games, the existence of 3D audio is none, almost none. So why, and what's happening like this, like that, and what should happen, to make it.
Okay, so I think that there are not too many bottlenecks, like technical or artistic bottlenecks. The tools are there. Even like vanilla Unreal has some functionality to it supports first order ambisonics, like right off in the engine, but I think that the main problem is the lack of awareness. That's the point. There are no like big obstacles aside from some additional costs of preparing sounds, creating or customizing audio systems to fit this spatial audio. But it's not as big as it could be, knowing that. Again, some of these tools are already there in middleware, or in the engine itself. But I think that the lack of awareness is the biggest point. As you said, I think that we will first see the implementation of spatial audio for the sake of accessibility, and then after the industry will sort of get accustomed with it, I think it might be used a bit more widely, but it's just my guess. It's you know.
But it's lack of awareness in game developers at the site, or so they don't have a. But you know, we see every day like in new games like triple games that has like a great 3D audio, and so what's the problem?
Yeah, that's true. And you know, if you would ask any developer if he prefers poor audio or better audio, he will tell you he prefers better. That's obvious, of course. But you know, once money start counting in, and there is aside from wishes, there is a budget, and you have to pick and choose which area of game production you'd like to put more budget in. Then you know this additional functionality isn't all that important suddenly, and I kind of understand that. I mean, I know that it like every time we budget a game, we know that we cannot go wild with functionality with budgets, and even for me, it's kind of I try to find a balance where to so we can do as much good, as much cool things in the game, and not make it super expensive. So I kind of understand this perspective not only from a service provider but also from the developer.
So maybe the 3D audio should be like a plug and play in games, so just to cut the cost to zero.
Yes, that will be the best, because if it will be just a take box, let's say 3D audio, and boom, there it goes, then yeah, like all the developers will tick this box. You could even leave it on default in Unreal, and not many will even know that it's ticked by default. You could do this, but and it's going this direction, right? There are again the basic functionality. You can even buy some assets that are pre-produced to accommodate this spatial audio system in Unreal in FAB store already. But then again, it just needs some more time so that people actually realize that these assets are there, that you can create these assets on your own, and that implementing it's not it's not as costly as it might seem. At least at this level, but then again, it just all revolves around the idea of selling this. I don't like this word, but in a way, selling in this context, by selling I mean providing awareness to the developers that it actually matters, that it will change something, that the cost isn't all that big, but many users that appreciate audio in the game will find that there is a noticeable difference.
So if I may say something related to music, where I actually mostly spend time, I would say that it's lack of language, lack of skills. And I mean, when I first tried to do like a recording with Ambisonic's microphone and mix it, I couldn't find, and obviously I had friends who develop microphones, so it wasn't that, and some mentors who actually do some, I don't know, podcasts and some like a immersive, like a immersive content. But still, it was super hard, because to me, it was like a lot of technical jargon. So I, as a more, musician with some amateur mixing, mastering skills, it was to me, how can I translate what engineers say into something, practical, So I think, I can see right now, in the market, some better and better courses, onto like a mixing and mastering immersive content. But my first experience was like a super hard, just because I was interested more of on the technical side. I sort of like went through, but the barrier is still like a very, very big in my opinion, right? So it's just simply like not enough like a language, not actually understanding how specific technologies are combined with each other, right? So like mixing into ambisonics, then decoding to Atmos. Okay, Atmos is obviously like maybe one that is probably I'm not sure, but I think it's widely spread, right? But other than that, if you want to sort of combine other things, and what people actually mean by spatial, right? Is binaural spatial, or you mean more like something more sophisticated? So it's all creates a lot of like and you want to be a practical person who wants to mix a song or create some kind of content. It's just not, personally for me, it's not like worth spending my time, and I would just go with something simpler, because it's just like too much hassle for like a little value at the end, because at the end, not like everybody really yet appreciate, the end result, So if you, I would assume that if I was like a mixing, mastering, probably there are some here. Yeah, but it's just like, yeah, you need to simply be effective, right? You need to have workflows, and those workflows do not exist, in my opinion, yet. Or maybe I'm just not like a, yeah, that's my assumption, I would say, simply, right? I mean, that's what I experienced, and that's when I was just trying to find some content I couldn't get. It just, engineers trying to put more engineering, language on me, and I say, hey, I'm just trying to sort of, how shall I just, I mean, I can tell later about some of these experiences, but I mean, I couldn't get like a simple response, right? Make the beam like this, or, then do this like that, right?
So the ease of use for the end user, basically, right?
Not to the end user, I mean to the mixer or
yes,
like a mastering engineer, yeah?
Yeah, I think another problem if we, especially as we step away from games and more linear content like a movie or music, is the fragmentation of the ecosystem. I think that was a topic brought up in the previous panel. I think ADM solves a little bit that with a mezzanine format on the production side, so you can easily import and export content from your favorite digital audio workstation. But then when it comes to distributing that content, playing it back on different devices, I think there's still a lot of work to have a better story there in terms of compatibility across the ecosystem. So I'm really excited about the work happening in the Alliance for Open Media to try and bring out more open standard that can help solve some of this problem. And then there's a distribution, but also on the playback side. Like, for instance, today, if you watch, let's say, a show on Netflix on your iPhone with Apple AirPods, you get spatial audio, it's head tracked, it's great. But then if you switch to, let's say, a pair of JBL headphones, now, well, you don't get head tracking. Maybe you don't even get spatial rendering because those devices came from different manufacturers. There is no open standard for how you communicate head tracking between the phone and the headphones. So I think that's part of the challenge is that the core technology exists, but how do you deliver it consistently across devices? There's still a lot of work to kind of solve that broader problem.
Well, I think that there is a lot of competition also because we have standards like MPEG, MPEG-I, Dolby, and so on. Yeah, but everybody also is pushing these standards to different domains, and then how to integrate. The question is how to integrate those systems and standards. Yeah.
Sure, and I mean, not to get into a philosophical debate about open standard versus closed ecosystem, but it's a challenge, right? Because it's a big investment for someone to enable a new ecosystem. So a company like Dolby invested a lot to bring up Dolby Atmos and figure out how to integrate the pieces across the ecosystem. But I think we've reached a point now where there's awareness about spatial audio and so on, and the experience it can deliver. I think we need to now figure out, okay, how do we make this more open and accessible across a broader range of devices? Yeah.
I would like to play a short video that demonstrate that how 3D audio can play like important role in accessibility in games. So this is like a short clip from a Spider-Man game, and this is, let's say, state of the art that we have like 3 different layers of audio description. So first one is sound design that everybody has an access to it. This is like the main audio game. Then we have the next layer is audio description of what player can do right now at the moment. Maybe I will just say that this is like mainly for the blind person, but also visually impaired. And the third layer is the audio description of what is happening like everywhere on the screen. And so please listen to it and see what's the challenge is here to play that kind of games. But actually, people play it, and this game, for example, is fully accessible. So if you are a blind player, so you can go from like start to the end.
A limo. Hold triangle button. Air yank.
Generally, so the waypointing almost trapped you inside the building with a ton of geometry. But it made the waypoint motion so that it was emitting from an exit point rather than the actual direction.
Air yank. Square button. Hold. Swing kick.
Okay, so what you can hear here is like, the speed of this audio description is crazy. Yeah, and and the game is accessible, yeah, but this is, let's say, not inclusive, yeah. So of course you can play, but it's really like a challenge even for like a visually impaired person. And then I will show like another example. Okay, so this is another game where the audio description is not used by speech, let's say, but by dedicated sonification and game design. So we have this additional layer of description of what is going on by providing like a subtle sounds like whispers, wind, and so on. And also player have to learn those different sounds that give him like additional information about what is going on there. So actually, this is like information like in the 3D audio, pan that you know the player know in which direction she or he can go. Some very basic audio description about obstacles. But you can see that the challenge here is not about using the technology, but actually it's about how to use this technology, how to use sound design that is fully immersive and not destroy the whole game. Yeah, and right now the budget, for example, for this for the second game, Last of Us, was for the accessibility was, I think, significant. Because they had to hire a lot of consultants, and you know this is like a big challenge and real bottleneck. You know how to implement this audio features in games.
And just to mention that I think that The Last of Us is considered the best example of accessibility ever in game history, both in visual and audio domain. So that's worth noting.
Yeah, and that's for sure. This is the like the golden standard right now. Yeah. Okay, so maybe let's go to another question. So from your industry point of view, is the consumer demand 3D audio, or experiences or audio like a drive or technology drive innovation, and so okay, maybe I'll repeat. So does the technology drive innovation, or maybe the customer need drive the innovation in the 3D audio? So in your opinion, so how does it look? Maybe Remi.
Yeah, that's an interesting question. I think, especially when we work, a lot of us work a lot in spatial audio. It's easy to forget to take a step back and look at the broader picture. I remember when I was at Dolby, we did a lot of listening tests where you compare rendering content in stereo versus spatial, using what we call naive listener, where it's essentially people that don't work in the industry would just come in and do listening tests, and people were always surprised how the preference wasn't always for spatial, and it was a good reminder that you still have to really think about the basic quality of what you're doing. So for instance, by far the thing that drive preference in listening tests is things like levels, the amount of bass, and so you really have to get those things well calibrated to begin with. There's another challenge, which is at least when it comes to things like music, people have been listening in stereo for a long time, and more and more over headphones, and so they've built that as kind of an internal reference. That's what they're used to. And so even though you might be creating a spatial rendering that from your perspective is better, has some benefits, for a naive listener, if you will, the average person, it just sounds different from what they are used to. And so I think it can take some time for people to start to appreciate the benefits, and it doesn't necessarily always jump right away as something that's better. They may just think it's different. So I think part of it is we have to be careful about how and where we use spatial audio. In some way, these days I see an analogy with AI. People use AI for everything. I think last night at dinner someone was saying, "Oh yeah, pretty soon we'll be telling people you should tie your shoes with AI because it's like a tool for everything." And similar with spatial audio, there are use cases that call for spatial audio. I mean, an immersive game is a typical example, or maybe you go in a big movie theater with a nice sound system. But there are other applications, like if you're listening to music, are you listening to music in your living room in a quiet space where that's the focus of what you're doing? You really want to be immersed in that experience? Or are you listening to music while you're working on your computer and you want it to be more of something that happens in the background, less of a distraction? Or maybe you're walking down the street and you want to have some kind of soundtrack, but you don't want it to be distracting you from being aware of your surroundings. And I think especially as we get more and more devices that let you listen while keeping your ears open, whether it's using glasses or earbuds with like transparent mode, I think we're going to see people consume audio in these different modes, where there's times where it does call for something immersive and very dynamic and so on, and there's times where it's more something that's in the background and you're focused on another task. So I think part of the challenge is finding the right balance and the appropriate time where you want to push the technology there.
Yeah, so I would probably say that this is purely technology-driven innovation, not like a consumer need-driven innovation, because it's not like we can't live without without spatial audio, right? People like listen to mono stereo for decades. It's just many people say it's actually they don't need like a spatial at all, and they don't really care, right? So I think I always like to make this joke, right? Why we do these things? Because we can, right? So I think this is what engineers do, right? They simply push things forward. So one thing probably that I would say, being on this sort of like a other side, commercial side, is actually being aware at least where we are, right? So not just don't to fall into this bias trap that if I find this like a super important, everybody will. No, that's actually the biggest, I think, one of the biggest, reasons why people fail delivering products, right? Of course, some companies, large companies like Dolby can, invest millions and billions into like pushing technologies or like changing consumer habits, right? But I mean, not everybody, and obviously small companies cannot afford and they have to be aware that this is, this is where the industry is. On the other hand, also I know I'm not so much into games, but I know some, except Piotr, some people, in the gaming industry, and I once had a lunch with a friend who is an audio lead in one of the, like most recognized studios in Poland, game studios, and ask him, hey, so how is it actually with this spatial audio? Do really like a gamers value this 3D audio, or you do it just because it's fun and you want to like push things forward? And he's like, it's like, I don't want to. He made it like a rude joke, which is actually hard to translate into English, and it's actually like we're just like we are just having fun. It's just they don't actually understand it anyway. But it's just if we can do something, let's do it. Yeah. So it was just like a remark, obviously not in the official panel, not in the official presentation, but I mean that was actually nice because I'm always trying to sort of like measure the temperature, right, and understand where people actually are, honestly, right, and yeah. So that's what I mean, it's not necessarily a bad thing. Of course, we can, use this cliche example of Henry Ford, right? And obviously, if we ask people what they want, they will probably need faster horses, right? So in innovation comes from sometimes not agreeing with customer need. But obviously, from the, let's say, product management, product development perspective, it's hard, right? Because you need to like invest a lot of money into like a making it like a common and like a accepted widely by the end consumer, not just by engineers.
Yeah, I actually didn't hear this analogy about horses and automobiles, so it's an argument here. I mean, it's a like again, I didn't know that Henry Ford said something like this, but
It's not actually.
Okay, if it's a legend anyway, that's interesting. Yeah, I think that the push and pull is a bit disproportional. There is more push from the producers and developers of the technology, then pull from the consumers and developers that will use it. So there is this disproportion. And I think it will, like all other systems, will equalize in time. So I think that, just to put it shortly, to agree with guys here, that the consumer has a nice and transparent way to use these technologies. So I think that binaural will be the part of spatial or 3D audio that will be accommodated in the nearest future. That's my point of view.
Can I just one more remark? I mean, also, like I already mentioned this, I cannot recall the full name, called something, like a mixing engineer from Nashville, and he says actually he put into his, like a studio Atmos system, and he obviously like listen a lot of songs, compare a lot of songs. He says, I'm not actually neither, against or for. I'm just trying to sort of realize how good, the quality of the, of the recordings are. And he says, well, after like spending a year or two, like listening to music, in what traditionally mixed into stereo and to Atmos, he says, actually, in my view, the problem is actually not if spatial is good or not, or the question is actually, it's not like a mix propeller is, so people have this, at the end user has this impression, it sucks because it's not, because it wasn't mixed properly. Right? We discussed this also like earlier before the panel, right? That it's not just, you also mentioned here, right? That it's not just spatialized, it's also how much, bass and blah, 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 how to put it. It's just more complicated, right? So it can give impression that this is not needed, and also like a sort of like a decline the need or like a understanding of the consumer how good the technology is when it's actually applied properly.
Yes, we sound really skeptic, but okay, I also agree with what you already said, and yesterday we have go back again to Henio lecture. What is the plausibility, and from my so what is the expected audio that in I don't know, TV show or game and so on. And right now I'm working on this accessibility thing, and I did a research with blind people, blind gamers, and asked them, okay, what do you think about binaural audio? And they said that this is useless. That this is this is just wrong way to create audio for games. And then I started digging this topic because I was shocked, because a blind person should buy 3D audio just like that, yeah, and binaural. And it occurred that the binaural audio is usually, I would say, plausible, yeah. So it's so sound engineers create it in the way that we think that they should sound, and then it's totally useless for a blind person because it doesn't provide any sound cues for those people, and they are not able to navigate in the space. And so it was really, really interesting for me and shocking, and that's why I think that we need that we so target the end consumers with the wrong content, and for us it can be like a great thing, a great piece of content, of music, but actually the people just don't understand this, and this is just totally useless for them. Yeah.
There's this problem that producers of these technologies have. The technology is there, the research has been done, the hardware has been produced, and they find that it's not all that popular, and they still have this difficulty and this resistance of the industry to. I think that that the assumption was that the industry will embrace this new technology very quickly, and it seems that there is this resistance that they try to push through. So again, I will get back to the analogy with automobiles and horses. Perhaps it's a good thing, but again, I think that the development of this technology is more driven from the producer end than from the consumer end, like obviously.
Okay, so maybe one of the last questions. So, considering the technologies like ambisonics, object audio, binaural rendering, and so on, So what, in your opinion, which approach offers the most versatility for creators, like for sound engineers working across different platforms like headphones, loudspeakers, and so on and so on? I don't know, maybe Piotr, maybe from you.
But if you could rephrase the question, you mean which technology, which spatial audio technology is the best right now? Is that what you asked?
Maybe not the best, but which gives the most flexibility and yeah, maybe what is the best, like in your opinion, yeah, from your industry point of view?
Okay, but the flexibility for the creator, right? Okay, so well, obviously, the more channels you have to play with, the bigger sound systems that you have to play with, there is more freedom. But then again, you know, I don't really think in these terms. Like I think in reverse. Like first the end consumer, then the creator. So if somebody would ask me, like, bring me some toys and tell me which ones do you prefer, not keeping in mind that at the end of the day it has to go to the consumer, I would say, well, it's a difficult choice because I didn't think it through. Because again, this is not the way I think. The more channels you have, the better. The more tools at your disposal, the better. But it's difficult for me to answer this question. I didn't think it through, so can't tell.
Can I boost it? Actually, I was actually thinking how to answer this question, and actually you saved me because that's exactly my point. I say it really depends, right, on the context. And actually, I really have no answer. That's the tool set. Yeah, it's really like what do you actually what are you trying to achieve? What is your end consumer, right? And actually how big budget you have and stuff like this. Yeah, so it's definitely, it depends.
Yeah, I think on my side, I'll go more towards the object-based approach. I think I'm sort of aligned with some of the proposal that Jean-Marc Jarre has been pushing, where the idea is to decouple the content itself from the environment it's played in. In games, that means potentially, that's something that already happens because the game gets rendered at runtime, and so you simulate the acoustics of the space and you put the sound in the environment at runtime when you're playing the game, and you don't have any other choice because it's interactive. It all happens while you're playing. But I think that can be extended to other applications with more linear content. One space where it's potentially more obvious is with augmented reality, where you're playing content in the real space the user is in. You don't know that space ahead of time. So you really have to have this decoupling of the content from the environment, so you can adapt the environment to the space you're in when it's appropriate. There may be time where you want to provide an artificial space in the content, but there might be times where you want the content to blend. Like for instance, if you think of kind of the future version of video conferencing, where you might have virtual avatars in your room, you want to feel like you're in the same space as those avatars to have the most natural interaction and conversation. And so that requires, you can't sort of pre-bake that content with the reverb and so on to make that happen. So in that sense, I think an object-based format provides at least the flexibility to go in that direction. Now, the existing format don't provide all the things you need to do that. I think that's another sometimes misconception with object-based audio. So even things like Dolby Atmos, the information that's provided there is really just the object position. There's also things about object size and so on. But for instance, there's no information about the orientation of the objects, their radiation pattern, or anything about the acoustics of the environment, which all of those things are needed to do a more dynamic sort of 6-DoF rendering. So so anyway, I'm more of the camp of object-based audio, at least in theory, provides the flexibility. It still needs some work to kind of get to the full version of that.
Yeah, I must admit that I'm also on the object-based side, because even if I'm for years I propose like ambisonics to many different stuff, then in terms of the flexibility that gives you the object base is still like the unbeaten, and especially for the accessibility in games where you have to very accurately provide the audio cues, directions, and so on. So that's the most I think that's still the very important thing. On the other hand, if you're mixing, and then I find the ambisonics still the best thing to downmix everything to ambisonics and then do the mastering. But that's like opposite, different thing. Maybe we just skip the other questions because we are almost run out of the time, and give a chance to ask or maybe do you want to play the video?
Sure, I can do that. Well, maybe we ask if there's any questions.
Okay, so Remi have a video to play, but do you have any questions that would you like to ask or comments? Maybe you don't agree with us.
Yeah, Krzysztof Szczęsny, Aptiv. I'm just wondering, do you think if immersive even makes sense in automotive? I mean, my personal opinion, which doesn't matter because I'm just a developer, is that maybe it's too distracting for the driver because he should be focused on the driving and not being immersed. And when I heard the keynote yesterday, I thought that I was not the only one with this impression. So, what do you think? Thanks.
Well,
I have an opinion too, but just go. So I think that if you mean automotive, meaning playing back spatial audio in the car, if that's what you mean, actually it's one of the best applications you can have because you have a space designed for this specific system, so we can calibrate it on the level of designing the space in a car, so we can actually avoid this issue that the end user has not knowing how to set up his system, what to pick, and so on. So all the acoustic problems are handled the best way you can. And I think it's, well, for music, of course, because you can only listen to music, not really play games as a driver, but at least as a driver. So I think in terms of music, it's one of the simplest and easiest to convey solutions. Like, because you just buy a car that already has the system built in, you just need some music to, in this format to be played back. So actually, it might seem counterintuitive at first, but cars are actually a good place, I think, to use this technology.
Yeah, and I think there's two kind of technologies that also make it a lot more relevant. One is there's more and more electric cars that are quieter, so it's a better, it's not as noisy as an environment. It also self-driving cars. Might be biased living in San Francisco because those are now pretty common around the city, but it's definitely where the industry is going. And so when you have a self-driving car, even if it's only self-driving on the freeway, let's say, if you're going to be on the freeway for 4 hours and you don't have to drive the car, it seems like, yeah, you have the perfect environment. It's a calibrated setting. You know where the person's head is. So there's a lot of interesting things you can do with spatial audio. So and you can do things like different zones in the car. So it's an interesting playground that I think will become more and more relevant, to your point. Not so much when you're driving, but I think there's going to be more and more times where you're not driving and it becomes an interesting entertainment space. Yeah.
So maybe an anecdote from my side that I have a colleague that designs systems for cars, for premium cars. So, and they have totally different problems because one of the use cases they have is that, let's say that you are on the trip with your family, you stop, put the car on the side, you open the door from the car, and then you'd like to experience good quality stereo audio outside of the car. That is playback from the car, yeah, from the door, yeah. But this is like a totally different segment of customers.
All right, so yeah, I had just brought one video to help illustrate. One of the things we've talked about was, in addition to spatial rendering, is the acoustics aspect, rendering the space. So this is just a very short example. It's a video. My team at Meta, we develop an audio SDK to provide spatial audio capability in game engines and audio middleware. And something we released last year is an acoustics ray tracing engine. So there was a talk at GDC in San Francisco a couple of months ago. And I encourage you, if you're curious, to go watch the recording because it has more examples. But this is just a very quick video from there to kind of illustrate the effect of acoustics ray tracing. So it's just one scene. Hopefully, it will come out okay in the speakers in the room here, but yeah.
That clause ain't gonna protect you. You belong to us now.
So yeah, probably hard to hear in the room because you have the acoustics of the space. But this is a scene from the Batman Arkham Shadow game, which actually, not to do a commercial plug here, but it comes bundled with the new Quest headsets now. And this was the first game we worked with that team as we were developing this tool, so that it's the first game that actually uses this acoustics ray tracing feature. So if you're curious, if you have a chance to try a Quest headset, there's a free demo of the game you can download, and yeah, just check it out for yourself.
Okay, do you have another questions? If not, then thank you so much for participating. Thanks.
And encouraging people, so there's a meeting of the technical committee on spatial audio that I believe is just about to start. So if you're interested, I think it's on the same floor here. Yep, so encourage you to go to the meeting.
Yeah, thank you so much.